Well, hello everyone. It is so wonderful to have you here with us. Once again, I am Winnie Sun, your host today on the Winnie Sun Podcast. I hope you're having an incredible week because I am. And in fact, we just finished a beautiful weekend and I was looking forward to interviewing and spending some time, really, quality time, with Sara Bliss, who is the author of the brand new book, Take the Leap. Beautiful, right? Notice how I matched today for those of you who are watching on video. But Sara was someone who was introduced to me from a friend, and she is a 11-time New York Times bestseller and just an all-around amazing human being from what I hear too.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be on here.
Thank you so much for being here. I know. So Sara, you're based in New York City, aren't you?
I am. I'm a native New Yorker, born and bred, but I'm loving LA. So yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll take the leap over here.
Maybe, huh? Your kids probably wouldn't mind.
I know. I think everybody actually.
Well, I love that. Well, tell me, obviously your new baby, as I call this beautiful book here, this is something that I really want to deep dive in because, you know, your team was kind enough to send us a copy, and I gotta tell you, I got to spend 5 minutes with it before someone on my team grabbed it from me. And I was like, wait a minute. They're like, okay, we'll bring it back. And then everybody wanted to read this book, Take the Leap. Like, tell us, what is Take the Leap?
Take the Leap is about people that make radical life and career changes. And I'm sure, as you know, so many people hate their jobs or they're dreaming of something bigger, but they have no idea how to do it. And it seems really overwhelming. And so I wrote Take the Leap for them. The idea behind it is that the best people to talk to are people who have already made the change you want to make. So there's 63 people and all kinds of careers, switches, all ages, all backgrounds. So you'll find someone who you can relate with.
I love that. You know, I know many of you who are listening maybe feel that way or looking just to pivot or even to add that sort of side hustle to your present career. I know because I speak at so many different companies and so many employees will come up to me, and this is from some of the biggest companies that you've heard of, including like, you know, those big Hollywood studios. I'm like, Winnie, I love my job, but
Right.
I feel like there's something more for me. And I felt that way too. I mean, prior to being in the financial industry, I worked in the television industry. I owned and operated my own television audience production company and handled shows like America's Funniest Home Videos and Wheel of Fortune. I loved what I did, but I felt like there was more.
Absolutely. For a lot of people, that's it. And the thing is, for a lot of people, that what's hard, which might have happened to you, is that you were obviously really successful at your other job. And sometimes I think there's this guilt with people who have gotten really successful and they don't really want to make a switch because maybe they're making a lot of money and they feel like they've invested time, maybe a lot of schooling. But once you kind of have the urge, if you really, really want to do it, I recommend that everybody figure out how to take the leap because everyone I've talked to is so much happier. It's not easy to make these switches, but if it's something you really, really want to do and you're invested in, and clearly you're so passionate about what you do now, which is one of the reasons you're such a big success, then that's the time to really go for it.
Well, Sara, let me ask you about that. I think sometimes people feel like, well, I'm at this point where, like you said, I've spent so much schooling and education and I have income to support my family and my incredible team. How do you pivot, right? And I love that you said that you should seek out a way to sort of fill that void, if you will, right? And you've interviewed some really amazing people in this book, including someone I followed for years. I'm a big fan of, Bobbi Brown, and I'm sure many of people who have sat in my seat have asked you the same thing, and I know she's a friend of yours. So if you could maybe give us a little teaser, because I haven't been able to get the book for more than 5 minutes yet. Maybe you could tease a little bit and give us a little information about that, because we look at someone like Bobbi like, well, what more is there, right? She's done so much.
So one of the coolest things about Bobbi is she left her brand after 25 years. She was 60 and she had no idea what was next.
She's 60?
She's actually 61 now, but you would never know it.
She looks like she's in her 40s.
I know, I feel like we look like we're the same age. She's all about healthy living. Wow. And that's actually the interesting thing that you brought that up, is that when she was with Estee Lauder, her brand, Bobbi Brown Cosmetics, is owned by Estee Lauder, people would ask her all the time, what do you think is the secret to beauty? And she would always want to talk about food first. And she's such a health nut and a wellness person, and she feels that that's really the beginning. Like makeup is like an amazing topping, but it starts with how you feel about yourself and how you take care of yourself. So what was exciting about when she left her brand was she had the opportunity to pivot, and really she's created this whole new brand, Evolution 18, and it's a wellness beauty line, and it's just a huge partnership with a major retailer that's being announced this month. But there were a few months where she was really figuring it out. She didn't know. She was scared. She was reinventing herself. And she talks a little bit about that in the book.
I love that. I love that. So, it's everybody, everyone. I love to go and ask you this, because with 63 interviews, there must have been some stories out there that you weren't expecting, that surprised you.
Absolutely. One of them is this artist. Her name is Lisa Congdon. And, there's the whole myth of the starving artist. With a lot of the people in creative fields, I think they mentally had this idea, all right, well, I'm going to do what I love, but maybe I won't make as much money. Right. But Lisa actually figured out a way to pivot to a career that she loved in her 40s, to get out of $60,000 worth of debt. She freelanced for her company. She did a side hustle in retail. She opened a retail store, paid down the debt. Took her 3 years, all the time while she was building up a social media following and a career as an illustrator. And now she makes 6 figures. She makes way more than she ever did in her previous career, doing something she loves and is so happy at.
I love that. Sarah, that's what I always say when I speak at different events. I said, building that sort of, not only having a business that you love, but it needs to be profitable. Absolutely. And then also being really smart about building out your social media following. Because if you build out that following in a very loyal, devoted community, that you're devoted to them and they're devoted to you, then that is social currency that you can carry on from one brand to another company to, you'll have a lot of longevity and a lot more partnerships and opportunities. I never expected to be sitting here with you, being like a financial nerd and being in the financial business. I was really good at managing money, but I didn't realize how much more there would be. But I completely understand what you're talking about, of having that need or want to do something else. Because I think when you reach that position where you feel secure, in both your examples, it took a lot of hustle and a lot of work. But once you feel secure and you have that ability to say no, then you can actually say yes.
Absolutely. And going back to what you said about social media and Bobbi Brown, actually one of her best tips in the book is that social media is actually your best marketing tool. So if you're someone who is launching a startup or a new brand, or you have like a really cool product, social media is your best currency. And so many of these people in the book, they started brands in their living room, businesses in their living room. So in order to do that, having a free marketing tool could not be a better asset.
Absolutely. That's why, and anyone can do it, and it can be done so inexpensively. I remember building out my first 100,000 followers. It was blood, sweat, and tears, but it didn't cost me much money. It just cost me a lot of time. Right. So kids went down to sleep, and I'm and then before they woke up, but it was like, and I still do so much of it now. But that's great to hear that someone like Bobbi Brown thinks so highly of that, because obviously she's built a brand that many of us have looked up to, and the fact that she's now pivoting to her next chapter at 61 years old, I mean, that's impressive.
It's so badass.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Most people are thinking, okay, I'm just going to go on vacation now. But no, I'm thinking you and I would be in that situation where, like, 61, I think 61 is like the new 41. So what's next?
I know. And actually, there's a woman in the book named Trisha Cusden. She started a business at 65 because she didn't want to retire. She was a grandma, and she started a beauty business actually on YouTube. And it's wildly successful. She's based in the UK. It's called Look Fabulous Forever. She saw that there was a gap in the market for products, makeup products for older women, and she went for it.
That's so brilliant because one of my good friends and a client is like a big YouTuber, and I understand that that demographic is very valuable. So not only did she build a great brand, I'm sure YouTube compensates her very well for that, and she probably has a lot of brand alignments or businesses that have come from that. How brilliant is that? It's interesting, I don't know how you felt about this or if you saw this to be sort of an underlining continuous theme that a lot of businesses are benefiting because of social media, sort of a more of an even playing field. So you no longer need to be able to program or to create websites, right? You can build brands from, like you said, like your living room table. Do you find that to be a case? Like 63 people that you interviewed, would you say that was sort of common in a lot of them or more specific?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the really exciting thing about Take the Leap is that the whole career landscape has changed. And things that are possible for us now just weren't possible for our parents. Like, for example, my mom is a really amazing artist. But at the time that she was doing it, it was, she would sell maybe to a few friends, have a show once a year. Now you can make your hobby into a career. Like, there are platforms like Etsy, and you can now sell your products all around the world.
Even Instagram.
Yeah, even Instagram, and so easily. It's not that complicated. It's just a matter of reaching your audience, and social media allows you to do that. The web allows you to make these connections that weren't possible 20 years ago.
It's incredible because, thank you, Google, because I remember just like, it wasn't even that long ago, maybe 5-10 years ago. I remember someone asking me like, Winnie, why do you do so much social media? And I said, because, I believe in this. And like, is it really good for your business? I mean, it just seems like it's something like teenagers do. And I'm like, but I think that's short-sighted because there's so much that you can do. And I'm glad because now you have a whole book of leaders demonstrating the power of that. And tell us more. I mean, Sara, I feel like you're an encyclopedia of entrepreneurism, of the next, like sort of that pivot. And I'm loving this whole story and this whole theme because I remember being 20 some years old. I was working with so many different shows, moving so many people to so many different shows. And I remember my mom said, Winnie, are you sure? I mean, we didn't send you a great college for you to work in television. So I pivoted to going into the financial industry, not because I knew much about it, but more so that I wanted to please my parents.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And I remember getting to a point in my career, this was probably about, right around the time my oldest was born. So around, maybe around 10 years ago. And I remember thinking like, there's more to life than this. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like I had done quite a bit in the financial industry. I had gotten a lot of recognition of doing good work and my clients loved me, but I felt like there was something more. And your creative energy wasn't being utilized. Absolutely. And so really that's what has come about with social media and marketing and all the media work now fills that void and it feels good. I feel like I have more purpose now.
Absolutely. Well, I think for so many people, there's that moment of, is that all there is?
Right.
And that's really motivating. Jill Cartman, it's a totally different kind of pivot, but she was a successful novelist in New York, but she just had this feeling like she wanted to do something more. And she started performing stand-up. She had 3 kids, but she started performing stand-up on the side. One of her books ended up being optioned for a TV show on Bravo. It was called Odd Mom Out. And she ended up being the star and becoming an actress, a producer, and a star of her own show for the first time at 40 with 3 kids.
That's amazing because usually you wouldn't think of a novelist as someone who would want to do stand-up comedy, right? I mean, but I love that.
I know. Most of us writers tend to be kind of behind the scenes people, but Jill kind of recognized what her strengths are, and she's hilarious. She's a huge personality. She's so her own person, and it really was showcased beautifully in that show, and now she's started this whole new career for herself.
I love this. So Sara, let me ask you this. I'm just so curious. How did you find these 63 people? I mean, I'm sure many of them you already knew, but where do you go about finding people who did this pivot?
It's so funny. I don't always have an answer to that. I just am a really good researcher. I'm fabulous with Google. I'm great with networking. I've also been a writer for 20 years. So even the first guy that I ever interviewed, a guy named John Robshaw, who's a really well-known textile designer, when I first met him, he was telling me all about his career. He had been in a Korean soap opera. He had been a tugboat deckhand. He had had all these other lives before he found what worked. And that was kind of the beginning for me of being really fascinated by what people's backstory was. When I interview people, often it's because they're really successful and they want to talk about like what's current, but I always want to know like, how did you get there? And I saw so many people had failures or detours or totally different lives. And I think that's really inspiring for so many people, especially if you're someone that just hasn't found their groove yet. Right. And so I kept a running list of these types of stories in my head. And I found that I was always telling them to people too. You know, when you're out to dinner and people would be like, oh, I have this great idea, but I don't know. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have someone. And they made the change with like no money. And, you know, they were in the middle of nowhere. They had 5 kids and they were able to do it. And once you hear about someone who's done something like this, then like you have the motivation, you have that path where you see that, oh, this is possible. This isn't like just something for famous people. This is like something that maybe is possible for me.
I almost think that I love that you shared that, because I almost think that it's that person who isn't the person who's the richest person or the wealthiest person, the most successful person, but it's actually the person who has the drive and once reads this, gets that motivation, and it's a very organic, authentic, and real, like a real passionate decision to pivot and to make something better of yourself. I almost think it's more special, a little sweeter, because sometimes it's so easy to go out and hire a social media specialist, right?
Sure.
Hire someone to get you office space, hire someone to build this out for you. But when you do it yourself, those stories are the ones that I love to read and I love to learn from. You know, it's great to see someone who's already made it, but it's great to hear the stories that you've just shared, like the novelist, you know?
Well, I think, you know, especially in the career book space, if you want to be a CEO, if you want to be a founder, an entrepreneur, there's a lot of advice for you out there. But I think if you're someone that just wants to, you know, do a cool job, like make some sort of switch, maybe go into wellness or food or do a startup, but then you don't have there isn't as much for you out there. There aren't that many books that feature stories of real people, and especially really relatable people. And so that was really my main motivator, was to find the most relatable people, the most relatable stories. I mean, people who had something to lose financially, or as I said earlier, people all ages. Just so, again, someone will read the book and find like 10 people at least in there that they can relate with.
So what's the story that you tell your kids?
That not to get too hung up in the idea that you're going to do one thing for the rest of your life. I think that's a really dated idea.
That's a good lesson.
I do. And I think, you know, my son is 14. He's really into the idea that he wants to be a politician, and that's great. But I'm like, all right, well, when you're in college, you're also going to learn how to code. So, you know, just so that you have possibilities for yourself, you know, you don't limit yourself too much into one area. And I also keep up, you know, letting him know there's so many lawyers who became politicians, or, you know, now there's, you know, it used to be just lawyers and people in the military, but now, as we've seen from this past election, there's so many different kinds of people from so many different backgrounds doing this. So I think the biggest message to our kids is to hold on to the idea that you can make several changes in your life, and your life is going to lead you in lots of different ways. The people that are most successful are the people that are most comfortable with a pivot.
Oh, I love that. The people that are most successful are the people who are most comfortable with the pivot.
Yes.
I love that.
People that cling to safety, who are afraid of change, they don't do as well. I've noticed that. And I think the people that are open to the opportunity that maybe they didn't expect, a lot of the people in the book, as we talked about, they had that motivation maybe from childhood, or suddenly had an idea of something else they wanted to do. But there's a whole other group of people that weren't expecting to change. But then some sort of huge life opportunity or door opened, and they decided to go through it instead of staying in their own safe box.
Well, I don't know about you, but I mean, I can't wait to get my book back because Sarah, I want to go through this. Even, someone like myself who really right now I'm like, I have 4 companies that are running. I always feel like, what can we do next? And I feel like this is sort of like a whole universe of great ideas, Can you imagine? This is like basically a whole bunch of Jeff Bezos and Mark Cubans and goodness, all these incredible, like Kathy Ireland, who I adore. Hello, Kathy. Their stories, their beginning stories are in here. I mean, they're Sarah's versions of other people, but that's the idea. So if you're in that situation where you're looking for some motivation or even a next idea or something to get your just sort of creative juices flowing on where your next career could be or your next big idea, I feel like this is a great place to start.
It really is. It's the perfect place to start. And in my own life, I found that anytime I wanted to make any sort of change, I always talked to the people who had done it before me because they have the best advice. And that's a little bit of the way that the book serves. Like you're getting advice from 63 people who have already made every kind of change you can imagine.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, I have learned so much from you and spending some time with you has been wonderful. So thank you for coming into the studio. And for those of you who have a chance to read Sarah's book, I would love to hear from you. What was your favorite quote? What resonated with you? Feel free to submit that in questions and comments. I would love to see your thoughts. And of course, as you know, I'm always big on giving. So as soon as I'm done with this book, I'll choose one of you and I'll send it to you because sharing is caring after all. And Sarah, how can people learn more about you and sort of follow your next chapter, if you will?
So I'm Sara Bliss, NYC on Twitter and Instagram, and I have a website, sarabliss.com.
I love that. So that's SARABLISS.com. And with that, we will see you next time. Take care.